What's up, YouTubers? So today got a very simple video. A viewer of mine kind of requested my opinion on going with this titanium 225 stick welder or with the Everlast 210 series stick welder, and if it's really worth a couple $100. And yeah, I got an opinion on it, and rather than I guess sharing that up front, I'll just show you a couple differences in whether or not it's really worth it. So what I'm going to do now, I don't have an Everlast 210, but I have this Dynasty, and it has the same features for stick as the Everlast does. So like hot start, arc force control, stick stuck, where if you stick the rod, it'll automatically cut out the current. So let's do some welds and compare it and see what you're really getting, you know, when you get something with more features than that, and if they're really worth it. So let's get into it. Now, again, we're going to be using my Dynasty to simulate what the Everlast has. They're two different stick welders, but they function similar as far as how a lot of the features work. So with that said, the first feature I'm going to talk about is a stick stuck. Now, the Everlast machine has a feature where if the rod sticks, it cuts out the power, and then you can basically easily break off the rod, and I'll show you that. So it just shut off. Now I unclamped it here, but I don't know if you heard the little relay click. It shut the power off, which allows you to pretty easily break the rod off. Now in a flat plate position, is that a huge deal? Honestly, no. Where that mainly comes in handy is if you're welding like underneath a trailer or something, and you're welding vertical up, and you happen to stick the rod where you just don't have much room to get your hand in to grab the stinger to release the rod, like tight confines. That feature really helps. And I'll show it to you one more time. So it stuck it, it shut it off, and now I can just break it off because it cuts the current running through it. Now, the titanium 225 does not have that feature, so what will happen is the longer you keep that stuck, the rod's going to end up glowing. Will it damage the welder? Not really, but you're going to end up wrecking the rod if you keep it clamped for too long. And that's all pretty simple to solve, though. You can just pull the stinger off the rod, unclamp it, and solve it as well. Give the rod a second to cool down, and then pull it off. So is that a feature worth, you know, a significant amount of money over the titanium 225? I would say not really. It is a benefit though. So the Everlast welder and many higher end stick welders have what's known as hot start. Now I do believe that the titanium 225 has like a pre-built in hot start because it starts rods pretty crispy. Like you don't really have many rough starts with it. So how much does this matter? Hard to say. Now on my Dynasty and most stick welders that have hot start, a lot of times it's just either on or off. Some of them have adjustable durations, so how long it stays engaged as well as percentage. So say you set it for 100 amps and you set it for 120%, that will give you 120 amps, and then your duration will be the period of time that you have that engaged. Now, believe it or not, the Dynasty I'm gonna weld this with only has on or off. It doesn't have any kind of other adjustable settings, which I believe the Everlast 210 may. Honestly, it doesn't really matter that much as far as like adjustability. Just having it helps. And I'll show you, I'm gonna start a short little weld here, clean the slag off, and we'll look at it. So now when we look at this, the start of this weld kind of looks the same size as the rest of it. Now it's kind of welding at a weird angle. I apologize for not running straight. But the start isn't, you know, too cold, like it's kind of wetted in there. I'm going to turn the hot start feature off, restart with another rod, and we're going to look at the difference. Now if you look there, see how this start is wide, roughly the same width as a bead, and then this one is far, far more roped up. And I'll change the angle here. See how that's really roped up there? Hot start helps eliminate cold toes and just poor penetration. So is hot start something that's worth it? I would say so, yes. Now I'm actually gonna fire up that Harbor Freight welder, set it for the same 90 amps, and we're gonna do a test and run a weld and look at what it looks like compared to these two. All right, so I got the Harbor Freight welder set up, set it for 90 amps. Same rod. I got a brand new rod because these do have a little graphite tip to aid in starts. But we're gonna run a weld just like that and see if it looks more like the non-hot start or the hot start weld. So if you look, the start of that seems to be closer in width and height as the rest of the weld. I would definitely say it has some sort of a hot start feature. It may be, I would say probably not as good as what this one is, but it definitely does. It does not look all roped up like that one does. So yeah, so how much are you gaining with hot start? Well, it does have enough of one to where it's functional. I wouldn't really worry about that too much. So let's look at some other features. So using the same 90 amp setting for that 332 7018, I'm gonna run a partial weld with 6010 5P 1/8 inch rod. Both of them run at similar amperages. Now the titanium 225 has no arc force setting, so it's just whatever it is. It's probably equivalent to like a 30-40% setting on most welders that have adjustable arc force. But let's see how well this runs. So as you can see, it ran a decent weld. I did have a little bit harder of a start on that, and I'll run the Miller as well to show you. The titanium 225 is slightly harder to start the rod, be it a 6010 7018, just slightly harder than the Miller, and as well the Everlast will be a little bit easier, but again, not huge difference. Let me swap over to the Miller and let's run one as well. All right, so I got the Miller set up, same 90 amps, same arc force setting of 30% that I ran the 7018 at, so no difference there. And I'm just gonna fire this up and run a weld. I'll clean this up and we'll take a look at them. So this top one here was run with the Harbor Freight welder. This was run with the Dynasty. You can see a little bit of inconsistencies with my travel speed, but the overall appearance to them, even the starts, very similar. A little bit harder to start the rod with this guy. Now keep in mind, I mean, I'm literally welding around the camera and, you know, in a position to make starting a little bit harder. So some of that was me, but it is a little bit harder to start the arc without Miller's and Everlast hot start, and an Everlast hot start's very much the same. But both of these ran, I mean, very close to the same width and height, 6010 rods. So between those, I mean, they both run it. Same thing with the Everlast, not a big deal to run 6010 with them. Now, the difference with 6010 is with Miller and Everlast and welders with adjustable arc force, you can tune it to where the tighter you cram the rod in, the higher the amperage gets boosted, and it really can help you dig through scabby material, thick plate, get really good penetration. Now, I ran this at 30% arc force with the Miller. I generally use it at 60 to 70%. I like the way it runs better. So what I'm gonna do now is just boost the arc force up a little bit, and then I'll run a pass down here with higher arc force and we'll look at it. So when we look at this, the puddle's a little bit wider. And again, this is the same 90 amps that all of these are run at. A little bit wider of a puddle. If we cut it in half, there'd be a little bit more penetration because of the heat input. As I crammed the rod in, it really dug away. You can also tell just by the way it looks that it just, the heat affected zone real wide, so definitely a lot of heat input as well, more so than these two. But is adjustable arc force a make it or break it? Well, not really. I would say it's a tool for the toolbox. I would prefer to have adjustable arc force, but you can see that, is it really a requirement? Well, you can make good welds without it. It's just that with 6010 in particular, it does help you tailor the arc to, like, it makes the puddle more fluid and gives you a little bit better penetration. It's a tool for the toolbox, so that's how I look at it. Let's go on to the next thing. So one of the things I want to cover quickly is duty cycle. The titanium 225 can actually output over 200 amps. However, it has a very limited duty cycle. As a matter of fact, somewhere on here, it's 20% at 225 amps, so not really the best. At 150, 60 amps, you're going to be able to run fairly consistent, like non-stop without much issue. And that's on 240 volt. So the duty cycle at max output is less on this than the Everlast. I believe that's somewhere around 40 or 60%. I'll have to verify at 210, 200 amps. So better duty cycle. If you plan on using 180 amps plus a lot, you'd be better off going with the Everlast machine over this. Again, most of us that use these types of machines, we're not running, 532 7018s all day. 1/8-inch rods, 332s, this machine will handle no problem. Same thing with the Dynasty. I mean, this has a decent, probably 40-50% stick output at 200 amps for duty cycle, so that's not too bad. The other thing too is if you only have wall outlet power, like your 120 volts, this will only output 70 amps. This guy's like 90 maybe. The Everlast is probably somewhere between 80 and 100 on a 20 amp dedicated breaker. So if you're limited to voltage, you would also want to get the Everlast over this machine, and simply because you will get more power output. Now, honestly, it's not that this machine couldn't output more power, but they designed it to where it's code compliant with a couple of electrical codes, one of which being you can't just arbitrarily have it pull more than 20 amps out of a 20 amp circuit. So realistically, 70 amps is the limit of this, and the Everlast realistically should be somewhere around that as well. They just choose to go over the rated power output of a wall outlet. Now, it may give you nuisance trips on certain breakers when you exceed it by a little bit, probably not, but again, this is more or less code compliant the way that they set it up. Now, if you got 240 volt power, then you don't have any of those issues. So this will run just fine at its max output on 240. So I figured I would share my opinion at the end because I wanted to show you like subtle differences and to where my opinion will make more sense rather than just giving it at the front. Now, again, I don't have the Everlast 210, but the Dynasty functions very similar. My opinion is that if you're going to do a lot of stick welding and you want your stick welds to be dialed in just right, get the Everlast machine. The adjustable arc force will help you dial in your 6010, 6011. It does work for both of those. A little bit better than the titanium 225. The adjustable hot start, I believe it has adjustable hot start, is going to probably be a little bit better than the built-in hot start that's on the titanium 225, which will make the starts of your welds a little bit better. Beyond that, like the stick stuck feature, to me, it's handy for some things, but is it a make it or break it deal? Not really. I mean, you get in the habit of just unclipping the stinger off the rod anyways, so how much of that is a big deal? That's, to me, less of a concern. Duty cycle's probably a little better with the Everlast, so again, if you're gonna do more welding, the Everlast is gonna be better. Now, if it was my choice, I would want the Everlast machine simply because I can benefit from the features. However, depending on your skill level, you'd be far, far better off to get the titanium 225 for less money and spend all of the difference in money on rods and steel, because that will make you a by far better welder than the settings will. I mean, you saw me do a couple starts. It's a minor difference that, you know, the actual welds look very similar between, you know, a fully featured stick welder and a bare bones Harbor Freight. So that's because the skill level that I'm at, the differences I can, you know, make them less significant. Even with the welder that this guy had, which was an AC only buzz box, both the titanium 225 and the Everlast are a significant upgrade over that. You know, by far, you're going to get better starts, you're going to get better looking welds because they're on DC. Your rod selection, you can run any rod you want. Like, honestly, either one of them are a significant upgrade over a straight buzz box, so you really can't go wrong. So I guess in conclusion, my opinion is, if you have the money and you have decent skill and you have like the steel and the rods, spend the money to get the Everlast because it will help you fine tune your welds. If you're a little bit tighter on a budget, by all means, buy the titanium 225 and buy material and rods and practice. It's far better. Trust me on that. Spend the money on the practice end of things. So that's kind of where I'm at. I guess you're going to have to make the decision yourself on it, but that's kind of my thoughts on it. So anyways, thanks for sticking around. Until next time.